Joe, as you write in your book, much of the rituals were copy and paste or inspired from other rituals, other orders, in order to make it available as fast as possible. So, in other words, do the Illuminati have any meaning in the history of Freemasonry and its growth across time?
They do, and so they have it for several reasons. So, as far as like ritually, if you look at those 1781 rituals, because they're at this point they're trying to charter Masonic lodges, they need their own system. Kniga goes to the Lodge Zereinigkeit. They were a former strict observance lodge. And what he does is he takes like their 1761 rituals. I've now got two different copies of those rituals. And he takes those as the foundation. So it's the English Provincial Grand Lodge rituals, right? So from one aspect, they're Masonic reformers, but it's a matter of convenience, right? So like if you're trying to create a new Masonic system, do you write it from scratch in 16 days or did you copy it from somewhere? And that's what it was, is he grabbed a source. So it's a convenience thing for him. But also there is like a kind of a reforming aspect in what they did. And that's why it was attractive to other lodges. And, that was the style of Freemasonry that was practiced in Germany up until about 1764, right? And so what's interesting is, so if you had the older Masons who typically would be the officers and stuff in the lodge, they remember this old system. And so when they read it again, they're like, that's what we had before. And so that makes it attractive also. So on one hand, they're Masonic reformers. On the other hand, though, they're actually creating their own system devoid of a Grand Lodge to promote their high degree system. So there's a duality there, like
Yeah,
in everything. So
right.
I think they do have a place from a reform type aspect. They have another place for creating the eclectic rite. And, they had associations with them until 1789 when the eclectic rite was like, okay, you Illuminati guys, you're done. And then, and then a couple lodges dropped off. But I mean, they ran that system. Several ritual reforms happened, but the ritual reform is based on the 1781
Yeah.
Illuminati rituals. There's no way around it. And that's what it's a future book, but where I'm, side by side comparing them and showing you how they built it. And the process is they took Kniga's 1781 rituals in Frankfurt, and then Wetzlar got to have the final edit on it. And so the variations or the Wetzlar changes to it. But I mean, it was approved like in two goes. So it's the 1781 ritual, Wetzlar 1783 and
Yeah.
84 is the combined, and we're done. And that's how they did it. So that, yeah, they do have a very distinct place in Masonic history. But
Interesting.
their value depends on your perspective.
Yeah, true as well. True. Thank you. You correctly, in my opinion, expose in your work that there are many figures that have reached historical exposure. I'm thinking about Cagliostro, Weishaupt, Saint Martin, and use the cult of personality, what you just made reference to, in order to push the creation of orders, but mainly for personal gain or financial power control. And those are the ones that are making headlines for the conspiracy theorists.
Sure.
Why, in your opinion, has Freemasonry failed the marketing war against these extemporary type of orders?
Well, it's one of those things where in the U.S., I'll give you this, right? Like there's a few of them that are active right now that I can think of. We don't need to name any names because I'm not looking to make
Makes sense.
any enemies or anything. But there's a few that are active today, and it's always the same formula. It's cult of personality, interesting, exotic system that differs from what people are doing, something outside the mainstream, and it could be there could be different things that are attractive about it, right? So and what most of the time what they do is they go into Freemasonry and they recruit members out of their orders. And that's it's a tried and true method. We're never going to really rid ourselves of this thing. So what we need to do instead is to make a universal set of conditions that we can identify when these things arise, right? And just have like a little checklist. And it's like, do you have a cult of personality? Check. Oh, okay. Is it a new exotic system? Check. Okay, good.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you charge more for your degrees than regular Freemason lodges do? Check. Is this even like it at all? Like, oh, you're the head of the order too? Check. Oh, is it self-founded and created? Also a check. And you start going down the list, and
Yeah.
it becomes obvious what's happened. Like so, like no regular transmission of power, or if it's self-created or self-appointed, it's glaring red flags. And so that's all that we really need to talk to the brothers about is I think if and that's what a lot of what these books that I'm writing, like if we take like some of the information from those, if anything, just that, it's going to keep happening because what we're really describing is human nature, right? And so there's always going to be kind of malevolent forces, right? Whether it's for their own financial enrichment or their own self-aggrandizement, whatever the draw is, because a lot of times those type of people they have a draw not just for money but for power or influence as well. You can see them a mile away, but you just have to pay attention. That's all it
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
But it could even also extend into like leadership in our grand lodges too. Though we need to watch out for those type of people, anyways. Though because there's like the antisocial type, which is what we're describing, but there's the pro-social type too. That are ladder climbers, that are glad handers, that are people that they reach for the next rung on the ladder to ascend power, but they're not afraid to step on their brother's neck to get to it.
Yeah,
That's the exact kind of snake we need to be looking out for also.
so, in your opinion, then, Joe, well, one of the main sources of defense is actually the good side of Freemasonry continues and keep on working hard in trying to contain the negative part of Freemasonry that is there as part of human character.
Sure. And that's what I think too is like, that it's not a description of like Freemasonry anymore, that these sorts of things happen in political systems, religious systems, fraternal systems. It's an attribute of humanity, right? So like I think it's something like this. Maybe 99% of people, are good regular people like us. You can kind of spot them from the pronoun density. If it's all me, I, that kind of stuff, you can see them coming a mile away, right?
Yeah.
But you just have to pay attention to it. So there's that 1% that if you give them any kind of power, or conversely, if you let them take any kind of power, they're going to run wild with it. But here's the good news though. Every one of these people are the authors and the architects of their own demise. They blow themselves up. But what you don't want to do is get caught up in something like that, because unfortunately these types of people are very persuasive, but they lead people off the cliff basically.
Do you think that technology is actually giving a megaphone or an enhancer to this small group that will actually become even more dangerous than prior to social media, the internet, and this fast way of communicating, looking into the future? Do you see more danger out of that?
It's kind of like an amplifier, right? So all they're doing is they're amplifying their message. You can see some of these groups on Facebook. I mean, you probably ran across the same ones I'm thinking of. And what they do is that they're amplifying like their message, and it's even like direct marketing too, like in a way. And so, like the important thing is though is that it's tempting to restrict people's speech, but if you look throughout history, right, actually that's very, very bad,
Yeah.
because one of the things the Illuminati and just the suppression of everything, the whole reason they had to create a secret society is he originally just wanted to teach something like a college level course on like popular philosophy, was not allowed to do that, and look what happened, right? So
Yeah.
it's full circle. So we're like, and it's a universal truth too, that repression of ideas leads to their expansion. So these types of people, the best thing to do is not to do anything at all, because you know why? 100% guaranteed they will blow themselves up. Just
Yeah.
wait. But the other thing to do too, though, is to protect your institution, right? So maybe they're also a member of your system, but they've got their own system over here. Let them continue to operate, because they will blow themselves up and melt down. It will happen, and that's it. But just what you need to do is not let them get any kind of power in your systems where you guys overlap, because if you allow that to happen, you're in for a world of hurt.
Exactly. You put a virus in the system, and then
Right.
Thank you, Joe. Let's get back into you in this case. You described the experience of this book, 5 years of work, intense, exchange, traveling. I saw you were in different countries in Europe, and obviously you're working with a team that supports you, etc. So, and the level of investigations that you do, it's extremely deep. By doing this, somehow you enter into a dimension that is different from the reason why you started your Masonic journey. The way that you look at the ritual, the symbolism, and everything that inspire the perambulation and everything that happened in the temple. How much has this transitional period in you publishing your first book influenced the way that you look at the Masonic ritual today, or your Masonic journey in general?
So like one of the things that that's really changed a lot about me is like so in the US and basically all English speaking countries, right, they run a form of ancients ritual, right? Whether it's directly derived like in Pennsylvania and South Carolina from like the actual ancients ritual like that was published in the exposures, or it's a variation like Preston Webb, which comes later. That's the US, but then you also have like the emulation ritual. But if you go back further enough, you're actually getting to Preston, right? So
Yeah,
really, they're all kind of like coming. All that ritual really comes from like the same source. And what I've
right.
discovered along the way is I don't like that style of ritual. I don't like that style of ritual at all. I like the European modern style. And the reason why it's that, it's twofold for me. One, because the grass is always greener on the other side. And two, what I appreciate about it more too, though, is I've done deeper research. What I found out, though, that is a lot of the ancients' ritual. It's a spurious ritual system created by a self-appointed Grand Lodge who violated the sovereign jurisdiction of the premier Grand Lodge of England. But that's the technical things. But they end up
Yeah,
merging anyways during 1813. They come
right.
together, and that we get the ancients' ritual and the moderns' money and
Moderns.
building.
Yeah,
And so that's like so it's full circle. So it doesn't mean that today they're in a regular system, but I'm just saying that is true. But you also have to recognize the truth that ritual is a clandestine ritual to
yeah,
exclude the moderns from their lodges. That's the other truth that needs to be recognized as well. And so that's what all these back and forth things about regularity and so forth like that. It's a political like football field to go die on. Like I'm never going to touch that stuff with a 1,000-foot pole. But what I think though is interesting is that the English moderns rituals, if you go back to like the stuff that's in early Masonic catechisms by Knoop and Carr, right?
yeah,
If you go to those interesting things and you extract everything out of them, what you find out is the original Masonic system, both operative and actually speculative from the Premier Grand Lodge, the wardens were always in the West. Initially, they chalked the floors, which gave way to tracing boards, and we know that because there's exposures like in the Westminster Journal in 1742, where they're parading around with an EA carpet and they've got a cart
yeah,
with a coffin on the back. You tell me what that is, right? I mean, and that's what I'm getting at is
yeah.
it's full circle. So in the U.S., like up until about like 1837, there were still modern lodges operating here, working the French system under the Grand Orient. And they end up getting exterminated, and it's not an accident. It's delivered on purpose because people are trying to standardize the ritual. But
Yeah.
the trouble is that standardizing influence, it's autocratic and dictatorial. I'm all about maximum individual liberty. That's my personal ethos, right? And so what I don't like is I don't like one flavor of ice cream at the ice cream store. And because we have one flavor of ice cream at the ice cream store, I want to eat the chocolate, right? So I'm like hanging out in the back eating chocolate in the alley with my friends in Europe, right? And so that's what's going on. And what I would like to see in the US, I would like to see it evolve into something where the Grand Lodges still retain their rituals. If a lodge wants to work a different ritual, fine. There's all these different things. We want to work the French Rite, you can work the French Rite. Like whatever you want to do, you're still under a regular Grand Lodge. So I want to see variation because that's the stuff that makes life interesting. Like if the only song that existed was Chopsticks, it would get annoying pretty quick, right? But I want some Bach, I want some Vivaldi, I want Scarlatti, I want these people. I don't want Chopsticks, right? And
Yeah.
that's what I've evolved to, and I've turned into something where I want something that I'm not supposed to have. And more importantly, I want something that's different, and that I believe personally, the continental European Masonic stuff is way closer to the original English moderns, and the reason is because it came from there.
In a previous interview that it is on the internet, you made a very interesting remark based on the amount of work that you have been doing in the last years, Joe. You have so much material that you don't know if you will be able to actually use it all for publishing. And it's
Mhm.
quite it's mind blowing to know that you have managed to collect this material. Because what you actually say in that interview is that that material has been digitized for the first time. So you're actually giving something for current and future Freemasons about
Yep.
material that who knows for how long the hard copy would be able to be read and used. So chapeau from that point of view. But having so much, how do you choose the line of the books that you're going to write? Don't tell me which one is your next book. Is my next question. I want to know: do you build a plan or something? How do you approach it?
Yeah. There. I'll show you how. What I do is I write it
Oh
out
no,
in this little journal right here. I don't know if you can see it.
I
But
can
it's
see
all
it. Yes.
it's war gamed out, kind of like what I'm working on.
Oh no, no,
And
no,
so
no.
as I go through it, I just run a highlighter through when I'm done, and then if I get a new idea, I just write it on the bottom and I keep going.
How many Red Bull do you take in order to sustain such work?
Well, it's interesting.
Wow, fascinating.
They say there's like certain people in the world that can like operate on very little sleep. The real secret to my success is I don't sleep. Like or not, I do sleep, but like maybe 3 to 4 hours at the most, and that's all I
Wow.
need. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a few other brothers that I'm working with that are exactly the same way, and so it's a gift, right? Like I can work and never get exhausted, never get tired,
Wow.
and I can go lay my head down for a few hours and be fully recharged and not feel bad at all. Like it's a weird thing, but it's also a gift where I can work. So my usual day is I do all my work stuff. Families usually goes to bed around 10:30, like everyone's down, and then I'll work till like 2 to 3 in the morning every night.
Wow, fascinating.
So I've got all that material, right? My intention is to use it all. But if I don't, I've also got digital copies, and they're already in safe places, right? So I could get hit by a truck tomorrow, and it wouldn't matter. Everything's safe, and so it's all digital too. That's the beautiful part because, like you say, we don't know how long this material is going to last,
Right.
and like when I like the real truth is writing the books is like kind of like putting the cherry on top of the ice cream. For me, the ice cream is actually going to the archives and doing the work. Like I give talks all over Europe, in the US, and it's not for any other reason but to get to the archives, right? Like it's the service that allows someone to pay for me to have airfare and a place to stay. I don't charge them any bill or any kind of money. I'm not interested in that. I just want to get to the archives, right? So
Yeah.
if you can provide me provision to get to your location, happy to give a talk, but I also want 1 day of archives.
Wow.
And that's how
Really.
I've been doing it, right? Like, and so there's been also like times where I'm in one country, but I want to go see other countries. And so I just have a friend come pick me up and we go, and then I go stay on their
That's
sofa and
great.
that kind of thing. And then, I've probably got like about maybe 60 to 70% of all the archives in Europe. And I'm not
Wow.
kidding. I'm not kidding at all. Like, and
Brilliant.
but the thing I've been after is are the rare archives. The most important archive in the world right now that nobody's really using is Sweden, and it's not even close. Not even close. That because they have like literally everything in an intact archive that was never disturbed, never moved, never molested by anyone, and it goes as material that goes all the way back into the 1730s.
Wow.
That's what I'm talking about. Like it, so that's it's. There's another one too. Copenhagen's also a very interesting archive
In Denmark.
in Denmark. That's right. And so
Ah,
like, but it's got more of the strict observance and the Golden Rosy Cross stuff. So
yeah.
that's what its real thing is. But the Swedish Rite has every system because the king was a collector of systems, right? But more
Wow.
importantly, like it has Boda, who was the last head of the Illuminati, probably one of the biggest German collectors of everything in the 18th century. He had it all. Most of it's still in Sweden. The only thing the Germans got back in the 1880s was the Schwedenkiste, which had about 21,000 pages of stuff related to the Illuminati. There's a few things that probably shouldn't have gone over, but there's probably also some things that are still in Sweden that probably should have. And what it was is the Swedes, the Germans asked for this. Okay, here's exactly what you're getting and nothing else. And so
Wow.
that's why that one's the most important archive. And so we've been extensively digitizing everything in that archive, and it's game changing. So like I'm not a smarter person than anyone else. I've just got access to better material than anyone else. That's really what we're dealing with here. Is like I've got a weird, odd, clunky writing style that some people like and some people don't, and it doesn't really matter about me because it's the material that's powerful. It's not me that's powerful. It's the material,
Yeah, I
right?
agree with you. I agree with you. Fascinating. Now the difficult question. Now I'm joking. The easy
Okay.
one. What's your next book?
Okay. Well, let me get my book. Hang on. Okay, so coming out later this year, I've got Apology of the Illuminati. 6 months after that, Pythagoras. These are both Vice Hop books under my Multiple Nerval Editions thing. The coming out, it's going to be we actually have Alen Bernheim writing the introduction for it now. So I've got that book coming out, and so it's going to be Sharp Documents, Chomsky, the Grand Orients, Marin Files. And so it's going to be ultimately a 3-volume set. First volume is going to be a lot of the Sharp materials. Second volume is going to be the rest of the Sharp, Chemitsky, and Grand Orient materials. And then the third volume is going to be rituals. And so the cool thing was, like, if you read in Bernheim's old stuff from the 80s, he talks about this one ritual he runs across. I ran it down, and he's right. It's the original ritual that Marin brought back from England,
I see.
and it's I think the paper on it's actually 49, but it's a copy of an earlier document that's probably about 45 or 46. So it's the original, like what becomes the our 14th degree.
But the trilogy that you're talking about is separated from the School of Stricter Wisdom. So that one will stay as an individual work. And then
Yes.
now you're starting with trilogies in the way that you work.
Well, I'm working this one in a trilogy because it's so much material. I mean, we're talking like we've gone through pushing 2,000 pages of like translated. And the way we're presenting the information too is we're doing it parallel transcription translation, which is even more difficult. So that way we've preserved the original French for anyone else who wants to do it later. And then we've got the English translation next to it, right? So that way you can check it. And if you don't like what we did, no trouble, go back to the
Always to the
French.
source.
That's it. And
Point.
so the information is so valuable because if you think about it, the history of the Scottish Rite's never been touched. So really what I'm doing is I'm doing history of all these systems. So my goal is before I'm dead and gone on the next plane of existence, I'll have conquered all of the 18th century high degree systems. And that's my goal.
Wow.
That's what I'm doing. So that 3-volume set's a Dare V book. And then I've got another one that really 2 that I'm doing. But I think the first one that's going to come out is the entire French Rite. So I've got the first through the 4th order of the entire French Rite. That one's going to be coming out with Westphalia for a conference we're doing in Paris. And
fantastic. Wow, it's mind-blowing what you're doing. I don't know the 3 hours if it's enough, but it's, the output is pretty good so far. Congratulations.
Yeah. Lewis is driving me hard to get that Golden Rosy Cross book out, but we've got another one that'll hit before that one does, and it's a thing on the 18th century English high degrees. And so no one's really touched on that material either. And so what we did is we've got the oldest Royal Arch ritual now in English, which is a 1766 Grand Chapter copy, right? So it's the original for the moderns, right?
Wow.
Not for the ancients. It's going to have Dunkerley in it. It's going to have the entire Bristol Rite, the Royal Order of Herodom. We've got a 50 copy from The Hague. We're also putting a 1789 Rouen copy and then a 1796 translated from Swedish, but at the time, because this guy also grabbed all that Dunkerley stuff. So he grabbed the Royal Order of Herodom and he grabbed also all the Dunkerley high degrees. And what it was is when they were building the Swedish Rite, the king sent over this guy, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but whoever he was, they sent him over there to copy their rituals that they're working at the time. And there's actually a little bit of transmission too, and some of the ideas and themes. But so, I mean, that British high degrees book, and it's going to have also, we've got the Scots Master from 42 that went to Lunion in Berlin. We've tracked that one down. Reinhard found that one back in 2018, and it's been in a couple places, but we're going to put it in there anyways because it's significant. And you can see where it's literally built off the Master Mason ritual with just a few augmentations. And that's what's the most important part about it.
Wow, brilliant. So this is usually my last question, but it's the first time that actually I have, I don't know if I need to ask you this because you're like the sun. You just project energy and the energy just give you energy to project more energy. Yes. You're just a fascinating person. But who does inspire Joe today?
That's a great question. Really, it's weird. Like I'm driven, and I've always been driven. And I get an idea in my head and it doesn't stop. So I see it and it can be 15 years in the future, 20 years in the future like that. And I'm always going to get to it because I'll figure out a way, and if life throws me a curveball, I don't take no for an answer. I'll step around it. That's probably why I'm in sales, right? If I see a problem, I figure a way to get around the problem, or sometimes the best move is stop, go advance on another front. And by the time you come back to it, something's changed and you had to do nothing. And then you just proceed. And so I don't let anything in life stop me. I'm not trying to say I motivate myself. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But what motivates me more than myself though, is just the information because it's so interesting and so fascinating. And like Art and I always joke around that like all these rituals and stuff, like 'cause he's a lot like me, which is actually kind of funny. It's our Masonic crack, basically. Like we're junkies for paper. That's what it is.
Brilliant.
It speaks to you too, right? Because like you'll touch these old papers, right? That no one's
Yeah,
touched like in maybe 80, 100 years, something like
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Some cases a couple hundred years, and it communicates more than just what's on the paper, right? Like that, like there's like a transfer, and I don't know what it is, there's something to it.
Brilliant. Joe, unfortunately for me, that was the last question. So I truly enjoyed. It has been not just a pleasure, honor, first of all, meeting you. But what has been really interesting is that I read the book before I met you, and now hearing how your creativity transform itself into your work, it's even mind blowing the way that it comes. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
I thank you for your time, for the openness in answering my question, and I hope then, when the next book comes out, we will have the possibility to meet and record it once again. So thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it in Paris this next year.
Sound like a deal.